The bullet tore through the saloon window 3 inches from Zara Montgomery's head, and she didn't even flinch. Every man in the Dusty Rose saloon froze, their whiskey glasses suspended halfway to their mouths, their card games forgotten. But Zara simply set down the glass she'd been polishing, walked calmly to the broken window, and looked out at the dust-choked street of Stockton, California, with eyes the color of storm clouds gathering over the Sierra Nevada. It was April 1878, and the town was still raw and rough around the edges, barely civilized despite the new railroad that had brought commerce and chaos in equal measure. "She's got the heart of a wild Mustang," old Pete Henderson muttered from his corner table, shaking his grizzled head. "That woman doesn't know what fear is." "More like she doesn't know when to quit," another patron added. "3 men have tried to court her this month alone. She sent every one of them packing." Zara heard every word. She was meant to. The men of Stockton had been talking about her for the 6 months since she'd arrived on the westbound train, wearing a black dress and carrying a single carpet bag. She'd bought the failing saloon with money no one could quite account for, though the whispers suggested a dead husband back east. She was 23 years old, stood 5 feet and 8 inches tall, and had hair the color of autumn wheat that she kept pinned up in a severe bun. Her face was striking rather than pretty, all sharp angles and determined lines, with a mouth that smiled rarely and a gaze that could cut through a man's bravado like a hot knife through butter. She turned from the window and addressed the room with the same calm authority she brought to everything. "Whoever fired that shot, tell them I'm not interested, and tell them the next time someone takes a shot near my establishment, I'll be returning fire." The men believed her. Zara Montgomery had proven herself capable of running a saloon in a rough railroad town, of keeping order when drunken cowboys got rowdy, and of standing her ground against claim jumpers, con men, and every variety of frontier scoundrel. She'd earned respect, but she'd also earned a reputation. Untouchable, unapproachable, wild. What Zara hadn't earned was peace. She retreated to her small office behind the bar, finally allowing herself to lean against the closed door and take a shaky breath. The bullet had been closer than she'd let on. Her hands trembled as she pressed them flat against the rough wood, willing herself back to steadiness. This was the life she'd chosen when she'd fled Philadelphia and the respectable prison of her late husband's family home. Thomas Montgomery had been 45 to her 18 when they'd married, a business arrangement orchestrated by her penniless father. Thomas had been kind enough, distant enough, and then dead enough within 3 years, leaving her with a modest inheritance and the crushing expectations of his family. They'd wanted her to remarry, another business arrangement, another cage with gilt bars. So she'd taken what money was rightfully hers and run west, toward open sky and possibility. She'd thought California would offer freedom. Instead, she'd found a different kind of trap. The men here wanted to own her just as surely as Thomas's family had, just with rougher hands and cruder words. The knock on her office door was soft, almost apologetic. "Come in, Sarah," Zara called, recognizing the gentle pattern. Sarah Chen entered with a tray bearing coffee and cornbread. She was 19, the daughter of one of the Chinese laborers who'd built the railroad and stayed on to work the fields east of town. Zara had hired her when no one else would, and Sarah's loyalty was absolute. "You should eat something," Sarah said quietly, setting down the tray. "And you should know that people are saying the shot came from the Turner gang. They're staying at the hotel across the street." Zara's jaw tightened. The Turner gang was nothing but trouble. 5 brothers who ran cattle they didn't own through land they didn't have rights to, selling beef to the railroad crews and asking no questions about brands or bills of sale. They'd been in town 3 days, drinking hard and causing problems. "Which brother?" Zara asked. "Cole, I think. The youngest one. He's been bragging that he'll have you married by summer." Zara laughed, a sharp sound without humor. "He'll have better luck lassoing the moon." Sarah's expression grew worried. "Miss Zara, maybe you should ask for help. The sheriff, he would—" "Sheriff Kowalski is in the Turner brothers' pocket," Zara interrupted. "You know that as well as I do. No, Sarah, if I'm going to survive in this town, I have to show strength, not weakness. The moment I go running to a man for protection is the moment I lose everything I've built." Sarah nodded, though her worry didn't fade. There's something else. A man came into town this afternoon, a mountain man by the looks of him. He's been watching the saloon. Zara felt a flicker of unease. Watching it how? Like he's studying it. He's camped down by the river, but he walked through town earlier. Big man. Bigger than anyone I've ever seen. He had furs and a rifle. Looked like he just came down from the high country. Probably just passing through, Zara said, though she filed the information away. Mountain men occasionally came through Stockton, trading pelts and venison for supplies before disappearing back into the wilderness. They were a vanishing breed as civilization crept further into California, but a few still clung to the old ways. The evening crowd began to trickle in as the sun settled toward the western horizon, painting Stockton's dusty streets in shades of amber and rust. Zara emerged from her office, her composure fully restored, and took her position behind the bar. She'd learned early that her presence kept things calmer than when she stayed hidden away. The men behaved better when she was watching, as though her steady gaze reminded them of mothers and sisters in the civilized world they'd left behind. The Turner brothers arrived just after 8, filling the saloon with their noise and swagger. Cole Turner was 26, handsome in a rough way, with sun-bleached hair and eyes that held a mean gleam. His brothers ranged from 28 to 33, all cut from the same cloth, hard men who took what they wanted and left scorched earth behind them. Cole approached the bar with the confidence of a man who'd never been truly opposed. "Whiskey," he said, tossing coins on the scarred wood, "and I'll have that apology you owe me." Zara poured his drink with steady hands. "I don't recall owing you anything, Mr. Turner. You embarrassed me in front of the whole town, turning me down flat when I paid you a compliment last week." His voice was loud enough to carry. "That's not how a lady behaves." "Then it's fortunate I never claimed to be a lady," Zara replied evenly. "I'm a businesswoman. You're welcome to drink in my establishment if you can behave yourself. If you can't, there's the door." Cole's face darkened. His hand shot out, faster than she'd anticipated, and caught her wrist across the bar. His grip was painfully tight. "You need to learn some manners, Miss Montgomery. Lucky for you, I'm a patient teacher." The saloon went silent. Every eye turned toward the bar. Zara kept her expression neutral, despite the pain radiating up her arm. She'd learned long ago not to show weakness to predators. "Let go of me," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Or what?" Cole grinned. "You'll shoot me? Right here in front of witnesses?" "No," a new voice rumbled from the doorway. "But I will." Every head swiveled toward the entrance. The man who stood there had to duck to clear the doorframe. He was massive, easily 6 feet and 5 inches tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked the fading sunlight behind him. His hair was dark brown, long enough to brush his shoulders, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that captured attention, a pale blue-gray like winter sky, sharp and assessing. He wore buckskin and furs despite the spring warmth, and carried a rifle that looked well-used and well-loved, the mountain man Sarah had mentioned. Cole released Zara's wrist and turned to face the newcomer. "This isn't your business, stranger." The big man moved into the saloon with a quiet grace that belied his size. Every step was measured, controlled. Zara recognized the economical movement of someone who'd survived by being aware of every threat, every option. "I'm making it my business," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones tumbling in a river. "You don't know who you're dealing with," one of Cole's brothers warned, rising from his table. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," the mountain man replied. "The Turner gang. You run cattle you don't own through land you don't have rights to. You've left a trail of angry ranchers from here to Nevada, and right now you're bothering a woman who's made it clear she wants nothing to do with you." Cole's hand moved toward his gun. Before Zara could even draw breath to shout a warning, the mountain man had moved. He closed the distance in 2 long strides, caught Cole's wrist in one massive hand, and applied pressure. Cole yelped, and his gun clattered to the floor. "I'd rather not break bones tonight," the mountain man said conversationally, "but I will if I need to. The lady asked you to leave her alone, so you're going to apologize, collect your brothers, and find somewhere else to drink." For a long moment, the tension stretched taut enough to snap. Then Cole, his face white with pain, managed to nod. The mountain man released him, and Cole stumbled backward, cradling his wrist. "You'll regret this," Cole spat. "Maybe," the big man agreed, "but not tonight." The Turner brothers collected themselves in their pride and filed out of the saloon with murder in their eyes. The moment they were gone, conversation erupted throughout the room. The mountain man turned to Zara, and she found herself the subject of that penetrating winter sky gaze. "Are you all right, madam?" he asked. Zara straightened, rubbing her wrist where Cole had grabbed her. "I am, though I didn't need rescuing." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his bearded face. "I don't doubt it, but sometimes it's nice not to have to fight every battle alone." She wanted to argue, to assert her independence, but honesty stopped her. Her wrist throbbed, and she'd been seconds away from reaching for the small pistol she kept behind the bar. The situation could have turned bloody. "Thank you," she said instead, the words grudging but sincere. He nodded. "Name's Xander Vaughn. I just came down from the mountains to trade some furs and get supplies." "Zara Montgomery. This is my saloon." She paused, studying him. "You know who the Turners are." "I make it my business to know who the dangerous people are in any place I pass through. They've got a reputation that stretches pretty far." His gaze moved to the broken window. "That your handiwork or theirs?" "Theirs. Warning shot, I think." Xander's expression darkened. "They'll be back, Miss Montgomery. Men like that don't take embarrassment well." "I know." Zara poured herself a whiskey, then surprised herself by pouring a second and sliding it across the bar to him. "But I've dealt with difficult men before." "I'm sure you have." Xander accepted the drink but didn't move to take it yet. "Sarah mentioned you've been on your own here for 6 months." So he'd talked to her employee. Zara felt a flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, at the thought of this stranger asking questions about her. "Sarah talks too much. She's worried about you. Seems like a lot of people are." Xander gestured toward the other patrons, many of whom were still glancing toward the bar with concern. "You've made an impression on this town." "I've made myself useful," Zara corrected. "There's a difference." Xander took a slow sip of the whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers. "Why'd you come west, if you don't mind my asking?" "I do mind," Zara said, but without heat. "My past is my own business, Mr. Vaughn." "Fair enough." He set the empty glass down with a nod of appreciation. "Good whiskey. Better than most places serve." "I don't serve cheap rotgut. Bad for business and bad for keeping the peace." Zara refilled his glass without being asked. "Will you be staying in Stockton long?" "Depends," Xander said. "On what?" His winter sky eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "On whether I'm needed." Before Zara could formulate a response, the saloon doors burst open again. This time, it was Sheriff Kowalski, his pot belly straining against his vest, his face florid with drink or anger or both. "There's been a complaint," he announced. "Cole Turner says he was assaulted in this establishment." Xander turned slowly to face the sheriff. "Cole Turner assaulted Miss Montgomery first. I simply encouraged him to stop." Kowalski's eyes narrowed. "And who might you be?" "Xander Vaughn. I'm just passing through." "Well, Mr. Vaughn, maybe you should pass through a little faster. The Turners are respected businessmen in this town, and we don't take kindly to drifters causing trouble." "Respected," Zara interjected sharply, "is not the word I'd use for men who threaten women and fire shots through saloon windows." The sheriff's gaze swung to her. "Now, Zara, you know boys will be boys. Cole was probably just trying to get your attention." "He got it," Zara said icily, "and my attention told him to leave me alone. When he didn't listen, Mr. Vaughn here intervened to prevent things from escalating. Unless you'd have preferred gunfire in my saloon, Sheriff?" Kowalski looked between them, clearly calculating. He was lazy and corrupt, but not entirely stupid. The saloon was full of witnesses, all of whom looked more sympathetic to Zara and Xander than to the Turners. "Just make sure there's no more trouble," he finally said, "from either of you." After the sheriff left, Zara allowed herself a small exhale of relief. Xander remained at the bar, his massive frame relaxed but his eyes alert. "That man's going to be a problem," he observed. "He already is," Zara agreed, "but he's the only law in Stockton, such as it is. Then maybe Stockton needs better law." Zara felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest, a warmth she couldn't quite name. This mountain man, this stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere, seemed genuinely concerned about her welfare. Not because he wanted something from her, at least not in the way other men did, but simply because it was the right thing to do. "Why did you really help me tonight?" she asked quietly. Xander was silent for a long moment, his rough fingers tracing patterns on the bar. "I've spent the last 8 years in the high country," he finally said, "living alone, trapping, hunting, keeping to myself. It's a good life in some ways, peaceful, but it's also lonely. And sometimes, when you're alone that long, you forget what it's like to be part of the world." "That doesn't answer my question." He looked up at her, and the raw honesty in his gaze made her heart skip. "I saw you through the window this afternoon, saw you standing behind this bar, holding your own in a room full of rough men, saw the way you carried yourself like you were made of iron and fire. And I thought, there's someone who knows what it's like to stand alone against the world." He paused. "Then I saw Cole Turner grab you, and something in me just reacted. Couldn't walk away." Zara didn't know what to say. She was accustomed to flowery compliments from men who wanted her property or her body or both. She was used to crude propositions and business negotiations disguised as courtship. But this quiet acknowledgement of kinship, this recognition from one solitary soul to another, left her momentarily speechless. "I should close up," she finally managed. "It's getting late." Xander nodded and rose to his full, impressive height. "Where are you camping?" The question escaped before Zara could stop it. "Down by the river, like Sarah probably told you. That's Turner territory. They use those camps." "I know," Xander said simply. Zara felt a spike of alarm. "They'll come after you tonight, all 5 of them." "Maybe." Xander's expression was unconcerned. "I've dealt with worse than the Turner brothers, Miss Montgomery. Have you dealt with 5 armed men who feel humiliated and want revenge?" "Once or twice." He smiled slightly, the expression softening the hard lines of his face. "I appreciate the concern, though." "It's not concern," Zara lied. "I just don't want your death on my conscience." "Then your conscience can rest easy. I'll see you tomorrow." Xander touched his fingers to his forehead in an old-fashioned gesture of respect and headed for the door. Zara watched him go, that unfamiliar warmth still spreading through her chest. Sarah appeared at her elbow, making her jump. "He's different from the others," Sarah observed. "He's just another man passing through," Zara said firmly, trying to convince herself as much as Sarah. "If you say so, Miss Zara." Sarah's tone suggested she didn't believe a word of it. That night, Zara lay awake in her small room above the saloon, listening to the sounds of Stockton settling into uneasy sleep. Her wrist still ached where Cole had grabbed her. She kept thinking about Xander Vaughn, about the controlled strength in his movements, the intelligence in those winter sky eyes, the loneliness he'd admitted to so plainly. "She's got the heart of a wild Mustang," the men of Stockton said. They meant it as a warning, as an explanation for why she couldn't be tamed or caught or corralled. What they didn't understand was that wild things weren't wild because they were mean or difficult. They were wild because they'd learned that trust was dangerous, that letting someone close meant giving them the power to hurt you. Zara had been hurt enough, by her father, who'd sold her like property, by her dead husband's family, who'd seen her as a womb and a status symbol, by every man who'd looked at her and seen not a person, but a challenge, a prize, a thing to be won. She wouldn't be won. Not by Cole Turner, not by anyone. But as she finally drifted toward sleep, her last thought was of a mountain man with kind eyes who'd said he understood loneliness. The next morning dawned clear and warm, promising another beautiful California spring day. Zara rose early, as was her habit, and went downstairs to begin preparing the saloon for the day's business. She was sweeping the floor when a knock came at the door. Xander Vaughn stood on the wooden walkway, looking none the worse for wear. In the morning light, Zara could see him more clearly. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 27 or 28, though his beard and weathered features added years. His buckskin shirt was open at the throat, revealing a chest corded with muscle. His arms were thick as fence posts, and his hands were scarred from a lifetime of hard work. "You're alive," Zara said, unaccountably relieved. "I am." Xander's eyes held that glint of amusement again. "The Turners did pay me a visit last night. We had a conversation." A conversation? More or less. They understand now that bothering you means dealing with me. Zara set down her broom, irritation flaring. I didn't ask for a protector, Mr. Vaughn. No, you didn't. He remained calm in the face of her anger. But you have one anyway, at least for as long as I'm in town. And how long will that be? I'm not sure yet. Xander stepped into the saloon, and Zara was once again struck by his sheer size. He made the space feel smaller just by occupying it. I was thinking I might stick around Stockton for a while, maybe find some work. What kind of work does a mountain man do in a town? Xander shrugged. Whatever needs doing. I can build, repair things, handle trouble. I'm stronger than most men, and I know how to use it. Zara studied him, trying to understand his angle. Every man wanted something. Why would you want to stay here? You said yourself you prefer the mountains. I do, Xander agreed. But like I also said, it gets lonely up there. And sometimes a man reaches a point where he needs to remember what it's like to be around people. His gaze was direct, honest. Besides, you're in trouble whether you want to admit it or not. The Turners won't give up and the sheriff won't help you. Seems like you could use a friend. I have friends, Zara protested. Do you? Xander's question was gentle, not mocking. Or do you have employees and customers and people who respect you from a careful distance? The accuracy of his observation stung. Zara turned away, resuming her sweeping with more vigor than necessary. What makes you think you can just waltz into my life and appoint yourself my guardian? I don't think that, Xander said. I'm not trying to control you or own you or any of the things I suspect other men have tried. I'm just offering help, freely given, with no strings attached. Zara wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her to send him away, to maintain her independence, to prove she needed no one. But pragmatism warred with pride. The Turners were a real threat. The sheriff was useless at best, actively hostile at worst, and Xander Vaughn, for all that he was a stranger, had already proven himself willing to stand between her and danger. If you're going to stay in town, you'll need a place to sleep, she heard herself say. There's a room above the saloon, small but clean. I use it for storage mostly. You could have it in exchange for work around the place. Xander's expression softened. That's generous. It's practical, Zara corrected. The roof needs patching, the back door sticks, and I could use someone to haul barrels from the storeroom. Consider it a business arrangement. A business arrangement, Xander repeated, but his tone suggested he understood it was something more than that. All right, Miss Montgomery, you've got yourself a deal. They shook hands, and Zara was acutely aware of how her palm disappeared into his massive grip. His hands were rough with calluses, warm and solid. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and she pulled away perhaps too quickly. I'll show you the room, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. The storage room was indeed small, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a chest of drawers, but it had a window that overlooked the street and the river beyond. Xander examined it with the same careful attention he seemed to give everything. This will do fine, he said, better than sleeping on the ground. There are blankets in the chest. Sarah can bring up a pitcher of water for washing. Zara paused at the door. The work starts today, if you're willing. That roof won't patch itself. Yes, madam, Xander said, and she couldn't tell if he was being sincere or gently mocking her. Over the following days, Xander proved himself worth every penny of his room and board. He repaired the roof with quick efficiency, replaced 3 rotted boards on the saloon's front walkway, and fixed the sticking door so that it swung smooth and silent. He hauled barrels that would have required 3 normal men, and he did it all with a quiet competence that Zara found both impressive and oddly comforting. He also kept his word about the Turners. The brothers made a few more attempts to enter the saloon, but each time, Xander's presence was enough to turn them away. He didn't threaten, didn't posture, simply stood there with his arms crossed and his winter sky eyes watchful, a mountain of muscle and quiet menace. After the 3rd such encounter, the Turners started drinking at the hotel bar instead. Zara told herself she was grateful for the peace. She didn't examine too closely the way her eyes sought Xander out throughout the day, or the way her heart lifted when she heard his deep voice rumbling in conversation with the customers. He had a way with people, she noticed. The rough railroad workers and cowboys respected his strength, while the shopkeepers and farmers appreciated his calm, measured manner. Even Sarah, usually shy around men, chattered happily in his presence. He's good for business, Zara told herself. That's all. But late at night, lying in her bed and listening to the floorboards creak in the room down the hall where Xander slept, she knew it was more than that. It had been 2 weeks since Xander's arrival when things shifted between them. The evening had been busy, the saloon full of railroad workers fresh from their shifts, money in their pockets and thirst in their throats. Zara worked the bar alongside Xander, who'd proven himself capable of pouring drinks and keeping order. Around midnight, the last customer finally stumbled out into the night, and they were alone. "Long day," Xander observed, wiping down the bar. "Long week," Zara corrected. She was tired, bone-deep tired, but it was the good kind of exhaustion that came from honest work. "Thank you for the help tonight. You didn't have to stay so late." "Where else would I be?" Xander's tone was light, but his eyes were serious. Zara found herself trapped in that gaze, unable to look away. The saloon was quiet around them, intimate in the lamplight. She was suddenly, acutely aware that they were alone, that Xander was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Why are you really here?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "And don't tell me it's just for work and supplies. You could get those anywhere." Xander set down his cloth slowly. "Do you want the truth?" "Always." He moved around the bar, closing the distance between them. Zara's breath caught, but she held her ground. Xander stopped a respectful distance away, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his blue-gray eyes, far enough that she didn't feel crowded. "I came down from the mountains because I was lonely," he said quietly. "I came to Stockton because it was the nearest town. But I stayed because of you." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Me?" "You," Xander confirmed. "From the first moment I saw you, standing in that window with sunlight in your hair, I couldn't look away. And then I met you, talked to you, watched the way you handle yourself and your business and your life. You're the strongest woman I've ever met, Zara, and the most alone." "I choose to be alone," she said, but the words lacked conviction. "I know. So do I. Or I did." Xander's hand rose slowly, telegraphing his intention, giving her time to step back. When she didn't, he brushed his fingertips along her jaw, feather-light despite his size. "But maybe we've both been alone long enough." Zara should have pulled away. She should have reminded him that this was a business arrangement, that she wasn't interested in romance or courtship or any of the complications that came with trusting someone. But his touch was so gentle, and his eyes held such understanding, and she was so tired of being strong all the time. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Do what?" "Trust someone. Let someone in. I've been hurt too many times." Xander's thumb traced her cheekbone. "Then we'll go slow. So slow that you'll have time to stop me at any point. I'm not here to chase you down or break you or tame you, Zara. I'm here to earn your trust, a bit by bit, the way you'd earn the trust of a wild thing. Patient, gentle, giving you room to run if you need to." Tears stung Zara's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. "People in town, they say I've got the heart of a wild Mustang." "I know. I've heard them." Xander smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "But Mustangs aren't actually wild, you know. They're descended from domestic horses that escaped or were let go. They learned to be wild because they had to survive. But deep down, they still remember what it was like to trust." "What if I can't remember?" Zara asked, her voice breaking. "Then I'll remind you," Xander said simply. "Every day if I have to. No pressure, no expectations. Just patience." He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to refuse. When his lips brushed hers, soft as butterfly wings, Zara felt something crack open inside her chest. The kiss was brief, chaste even, but it held a promise that made her breath catch. When Xander pulled back, his eyes searched hers. "Was that all right?" Zara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good," Xander said, "because I'd very much like to do it again sometime, when you're ready." He stepped back then, restoring the distance between them, showing her that he meant what he said about patience. "You should get some sleep," he added. "I'll finish closing up down here." Zara fled upstairs, her emotions in turmoil. In her room, she pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. She was terrified. She was exhilarated. She was falling, and she didn't know if there would be anyone to catch her. But maybe, just maybe, she was ready to find out. The next morning brought storm clouds gathering over the mountains and tension crackling in the air. Zara came downstairs to find Xander already awake, coffee brewing, the saloon already swept and tidied. He looked up when she entered, and the warmth in his smile made her heart skip. "Morning," he said. "I made extra coffee." "Thank you." Zara accepted the cup he poured, their fingers brushing in the transfer. She found herself hyper-aware of every small touch, every glance. "Did you sleep well?" "Well enough. You?" "The same." It was a lie. She'd tossed and turned for hours, replaying their kiss, imagining different outcomes, worrying about what came next. But she wasn't ready to admit that. They worked through the morning in comfortable silence, preparing for the day's business. Customers trickled in around noon, and life resumed its normal rhythm. But everything felt different to Zara. She caught herself watching Xander when she thought he wasn't looking, admiring the way his muscles flexed as he lifted barrels, the way he threw his head back when he laughed at someone's joke, the gentleness in his rough hands when he helped Sarah carry a tray. Around mid-afternoon, Cole Turner appeared at the saloon entrance. Zara's spine stiffened immediately. Xander, who'd been across the room, moved to the bar with that same quiet grace that always surprised her. "We're not looking for trouble," Cole said, his hands held up in a gesture of peace. "I just came to talk." "Then talk," Zara said coldly. Cole's eyes darted to Xander, then back to Zara. "In private. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Mr. Vaughn." Cole's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. My brothers and I are leaving Stockton, heading up to Oregon, heard there's opportunity there. But before we go, I wanted to apologize." The words sounded like they were being dragged from him with rusty hooks. "I was out of line trying to force your hand. You made your feelings clear, and I should have respected that." Zara was stunned. Of all the things she'd expected, a genuine apology wasn't one of them. "What changed?" she asked suspiciously. Cole glanced at Xander again. "Your mountain man there. He had a conversation with me and my brothers. Made us understand some things about respect and consequences." He rubbed his jaw as though remembering an unpleasant encounter. "Anyway, we're leaving today. You won't be bothered by us again." After Cole left, Zara turned to Xander. "What exactly did you say to them?" Xander shrugged. "Just help them see reason." "With your fists?" "Among other things." His expression was unrepentant. "They needed to understand that harassing you had consequences. Now they do." Zara should have been angry at his high-handedness. Instead, she felt that warmth spreading through her chest again, the unfamiliar sensation of being cared for, protected not because she was weak, but because she mattered to someone. "Thank you," she said softly. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Xander continued his work around the saloon, but he also began to spend more time simply talking with Zara. He told her about his life in the mountains, about the isolation and the beauty, the danger and the freedom. He spoke of growing up in Missouri, of heading west at 19 after his parents died, of learning to survive in the wilderness because civilization felt suffocating. In turn, Zara found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone. She told him about her arranged marriage, about the cage of propriety and expectation, about the desperate flight to California and the fear that she'd never truly be free. Xander listened without judgment, without trying to fix or minimize or explain away her experiences. "You're brave," he said one evening as they sat on the saloon's back steps, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Braver than you give yourself credit for." "I don't feel brave," Zara admitted. "Most days I feel like I'm barely holding everything together." Xander's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that was becoming familiar. That's what bravery is, though. Doing what needs to be done even when you're afraid. They'd been sitting like that, hands clasped, when Zara turned to him and asked, "What do you want, Xander? Long term, I mean. Will you go back to the mountains eventually?" Xander was quiet for a long moment. "I thought I would," he finally said. "That was always the plan. Come down for supplies, then head back up to my cabin before winter. But now I'm not so sure." "Why not?" He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his winter sky eyes made her breath catch. "Because I found something down here I didn't expect to find. Someone, rather. And the thought of leaving her, of going back to that empty cabin alone, doesn't hold much appeal anymore. Zara's heart was pounding. Xander. I know, he interrupted gently. Too fast. Too much. I'm sorry. I told you I'd be patient, and I meant it. However long it takes for you to trust me, I'll wait. What if I never fully trust you? Zara asked, the fear raw in her voice. What if I'm too broken for that? Xander lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. You're not broken, Zara. You're wounded maybe, but wounds heal. And I'm not going anywhere. That night, Zara dreamed of wild horses running free across open plains, of storm-gray eyes watching from the safety of the herd's edge, of a massive stallion standing guard while the mares grazed peacefully. The next few weeks passed in a blur of small moments that added up to something significant. Xander brought her wildflowers he'd picked on his morning walks along the river. Zara made sure his favorite meals appeared at supper time. They developed a habit of sitting together after the saloon closed, talking until the early hours of the morning, sharing stories and silences in equal measure. The people of Stockton noticed, of course. Tongues wagged about the mountain man and the untamable saloon keeper, about how Zara Montgomery smiled more now, about how Xander Vaughn looked at her like she hung the moon. She's got the heart of a wild Mustang, Pete Henderson repeated one afternoon, nursing his whiskey at the bar. Xander, who was within earshot, turned to the old man with a gentle smile. Maybe, he agreed. But I'm willing to earn her trust slow, however long it takes. Pete studied him with shrewd eyes. You love her. It wasn't a question, but Xander answered anyway. I do. Does she know? Not yet, Xander admitted. I'm waiting for the right time. Don't wait too long, son, Pete advised. Life's short and opportunities pass by faster than you think. The right time came 3 days later, on a warm June evening when the air smelled of sage and distant rain. Zara closed the saloon early, claiming fatigue, and Xander suggested they take a walk. They ended up at the river's edge, where cottonwoods provided shade and the water burbled over smooth stones. I've been thinking, Zara said, her eyes on the flowing water. About what? Xander stood beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. About trust, about fear, about what I want from my life. She turned to face him. I spent so long running from cages that I built new ones for myself. I told myself I was independent, free, but really I was just alone, too afraid to let anyone close because closeness meant vulnerability. And now? Xander's voice was carefully neutral, but his eyes held hope. Now I'm still afraid, Zara admitted. But I'm more afraid of losing you. More afraid of waking up one day and realizing that I let something precious slip away because I was too scared to reach for it. Xander's hands rose to cup her face, his touch reverent. Zara Montgomery, I have loved you since the first moment I saw you. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you face down every challenge with your chin up and fire in your eyes. I love the soft parts you try to hide and the gentle heart you protect behind walls of iron. I love you, and I will spend every day of my life earning the right to stand beside you, if you'll let me. Tears streamed down Zara's face, but for once they weren't tears of pain or frustration. They were tears of relief, of joy, of walls finally crumbling. I love you too, she whispered. God help me, I love you too. When Xander kissed her this time, it wasn't the gentle brush of lips from their first kiss. This was deeper, more urgent, a claiming and a surrender all at once. Zara wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing against the solid warmth of him, feeling safe and desired in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xander rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. Zara laughed, the sound bright with happiness. You don't waste time, do you? I've wasted 8 years alone in the mountains, Xander countered. I don't want to waste another minute without you as my wife. But if you need time, if you need to be sure— Yes, Zara interrupted. Yes, I'll marry you. Xander swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, his smile was radiant. You've made me the happiest man in California. I haven't made you anything, Zara teased, finding joy in the banter. You earned this, remember? Slow and patient, like gentling a wild Mustang. And it was worth every second, Xander said, kissing her again. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the church on Main Street. Half of Stockton turned out to witness the wedding, curiosity and goodwill bringing them in equal numbers. Zara wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Sarah had helped her alter, her wheat gold hair loose around her shoulders. Xander had trimmed his beard and wore new clothes, though he still looked every inch the mountain man in denim and leather. Pete Henderson gave Zara away, the old man's eyes suspiciously bright as he placed her hand in Xander's. "Take care of her, son," he said. "With my life," Xander promised. The reception was held at the saloon, naturally, with free drinks for all and music provided by a fiddle player who'd come through on the afternoon stage. Zara danced with her husband, marveling at how carefully he moved, how conscious he was of his strength. Other couples joined them on the makeshift dance floor, and Stockton celebrated late into the night. When they finally retreated upstairs, Zara felt nervous anticipation fluttering in her stomach. Her marriage to Thomas had been dutiful and passionless, a transaction completed in the dark. But with Xander, everything was different. He seemed to sense her nerves. "We don't have to do anything tonight," he said gently, his hands on her shoulders. "We have all the time in the world." "I want to," Zara said, and she meant it. "I'm just not sure I know how to be with someone I actually love." Xander's expression softened. "Then we'll figure it out together. Nice and slow, remember?" He was true to his word. Patient and gentle, he showed her what it meant to be treasured, to be desired not just for duty, but for joy. When Zara finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. The weeks that followed were a period of adjustment and discovery. Xander proved himself adept at running the saloon, his presence allowing Zara to take time for herself for the first time since she had arrived in Stockton. They made improvements to the building, adding a proper kitchen and expanding the upstairs living quarters. Xander built furniture with his own hands, massive pieces that could support his weight and delicate carvings that revealed an artistic side he'd kept hidden. They talked about the future. Xander admitted he missed the mountains sometimes, missed the solitude and the wild spaces. Zara surprised herself by suggesting they might spend summers in the high country, closing the saloon for a few months each year. "Sarah could manage things while we're gone," she said, "and I think I'd like to see the places you love." Xander's eyes lit up. "You'd do that? Leave your business?" "It's our business now," Zara corrected, "and yes, I think I would. As long as I'm with you, I can be anywhere." In August, Zara realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She'd never imagined herself as a mother, never wanted children in her loveless first marriage. But the thought of carrying Xander's child, of creating a family built on love rather than obligation, made her heart swell. She told him over breakfast on a Sunday morning, the saloon closed and quiet around them. "I'm going to have a baby," she said simply. Xander's fork clattered to his plate. "A baby?" His voice was strangled with emotion. "Our baby, due in March, the doctor thinks." Xander was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms with a gentleness that belied his strength. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "Zara, I don't even have words." "Happy words, I hope," Zara said, suddenly uncertain. "The happiest," Xander assured her. He dropped to his knees, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I already love you more than I thought possible." Zara ran her fingers through his long hair, her heart full to bursting. "We're going to be parents." "The best parents," Xander agreed. "Our child will grow up knowing they're loved, wanted, cherished. They'll never doubt their worth." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Xander became even more protective, if such a thing were possible, hovering and fussing until Zara had to shoo him away. She continued working the saloon through the fall, though she allowed Sarah and Xander to take on more of the heavy lifting. The people of Stockton rallied around them, bringing baby clothes and blankets, offering advice and congratulations. Winter arrived with cold rain and occasional snow, rare for the valley but not unheard of. Zara grew round with child, and Xander built a cradle from oak, carving intricate patterns of mountains and mustangs into the wood. "For our wild little one," he said, showing her the finished piece. Their son was born on a crisp March morning in 1879, arriving with his father's powerful lungs and his mother's stubborn determination. They named him Wyatt after Xander's father, and Benjamin after Zara's grandfather who'd been kind to her in childhood. Xander held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming into his beard. "He's perfect," he breathed. "Zara, he's absolutely perfect." "He is," Zara agreed, exhausted but radiant. "He's ours." Wyatt grew quickly, a happy baby with his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's wheat-gold hair. Xander proved himself a devoted father, carrying the boy everywhere, singing to him in a rumbling bass, teaching him to recognize bird calls before he could even walk. When Wyatt was 6 months old, they made their first trip to the mountains. Xander led them to his cabin, a sturdy structure nestled in a high valley with peaks rising all around. Zara fell in love with the place instantly, understanding for the first time why Xander had chosen solitude over civilization. The air was clean and sharp, the silence broken only by wind and water and wild things moving through the forest. They spent 2 months there that first summer, Xander teaching Zara how to fish and track, how to read the weather in the clouds and find her way by the stars. Wyatt thrived in the mountain air, his cheeks pink with health, his laughter echoing off stone walls. "I was wrong," Xander said one evening as they sat outside the cabin, watching the sun paint the peaks gold and crimson. Wyatt slept in a sling against his chest, one tiny hand clutching Xander's shirt. "About what?" Zara asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "About needing to choose between the mountains and the valley, between solitude and connection. With you and Wyatt, I have everything, the freedom of the wild places and the warmth of family. I never thought I could have both." "We make our own way," Zara said. "Isn't that what the West is supposed to be about, finding new paths instead of following old ones?" "When did you get so wise?" Xander teased, kissing the top of her head. "I've always been wise. You just finally noticed." They returned to Stockton in late September, tanned and healthy, their bond stronger than ever. The saloon had thrived under Sarah's management, and she'd even hired 2 new girls to help with the increased business. Zara promoted her to co-manager, giving her a share of the profits in recognition of her loyalty and skill. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Wyatt grew into a sturdy boy with his father's love of the outdoors and his mother's sharp mind. When he was 3, Zara became pregnant again. Their daughter Rose arrived on a snowy January morning, named for the saloon that had brought her parents together. She had her mother's storm-gray eyes and her father's dark hair, and she wrapped both parents around her tiny finger from the first moment. Xander proved himself equally devoted to his daughter, his rough hands gentle as he braided her hair, his deep voice soft when he sang her lullabies. Zara would often find him asleep in the rocking chair, Rose cradled against his massive chest, and her heart would overflow with love. They developed a rhythm to their lives, winters in Stockton, running the saloon and being part of the town's community, summers in the mountains, teaching their children to love the wild spaces as much as their parents did. Spring and fall split between both, planting roots in 2 worlds and finding richness in the balance. When Wyatt was 8 and Rose was 5, they made a decision together. They would expand their mountain cabin, building it into a proper home where they could spend even more time. Xander did most of the construction work himself, his son helping with the tasks a boy could manage. Zara gardened and preserved food, preparing for longer stays away from town. The new cabin was beautiful, with windows that captured the mountain views and a wide porch where they could sit on summer evenings. They added a barn for the horses Xander bought, sturdy mountain horses that could handle the steep trails. Wyatt learned to ride before he was 10, and Rose followed close behind. In Stockton, the saloon continued to prosper. Zara and Sarah ran it together now, a partnership of equals. Xander helped when needed, but also took on work as a guide, leading wealthy visitors from San Francisco into the high country to hunt and fish. His reputation grew, and he was sought after for his knowledge and his steady presence in dangerous situations. Life was good, but it wasn't perfect. There were hard times, too. A harsh winter when Wyatt was 12, when they were trapped in the mountain cabin for 3 weeks and supplies ran dangerously low. Xander hunted in blizzard conditions to keep them fed, and Zara rationed carefully, making every scrap of food stretch. They emerged from that winter stronger, more confident in their ability to weather any storm. There was the year Rose got pneumonia at age 7, and for a terrifying week, they thought they might lose her. Xander rode through a late spring snowstorm to fetch the doctor, nearly killing both himself and his horse in the process. Rose recovered slowly, but the fear of that time haunted both parents for years. There were arguments, too, the normal friction of two strong-willed people building a life together. Zara sometimes chafed at Xander's protectiveness, his tendency to make decisions without consulting her. Xander sometimes grew frustrated with Zara's stubborn independence, her reluctance to accept help even when she clearly needed it. But they learned to talk through their differences, to compromise and apologize and remember what had brought them together in the first place. "You're still as wild as that Mustang they used to compare you to," Xander told her once, after a particularly heated argument about whether they should expand the saloon or invest in more mountain property. "Stubborn and impossible and utterly beautiful." "And you're still the patient mountain man who earned my trust slow," Zara countered, her anger fading into fondness, "even when I don't make it easy." "Especially when you don't make it easy," Xander agreed, pulling her into his arms. "I knew what I was signing up for." As the years passed and their children grew, Zara and Xander grew too. They evolved from the wounded woman and the lonely mountain man who'd found each other in a dusty saloon into partners in every sense of the word. They made decisions together, raised their children together, built their dreams together. Wyatt developed into a young man much like his father, tall and broad-shouldered, comfortable in the wilderness but also capable of charm and conversation. He was 17 when he announced his intention to become a surveyor, mapping the wildlands that were rapidly being settled and developed. "I want to see those places before they're gone," he told his parents. "Record them, preserve them in some way." Xander understood immediately. Zara took longer to accept that her son would be leaving, striking out on his own into dangerous territory. But she remembered her own fierce need for independence at that age, and she gave her blessing. Rose, at 14, showed her mother's head for business and her father's love of the outdoors. She talked about running the saloon someday, or maybe starting a trading post in the mountains. "A place where people can get supplies before heading into the high country," she explained. "Somewhere between town and wilderness, serving both worlds." "Just like we do," Zara said, proud of her daughter's vision. It was the spring of 1898 when everything came full circle. Zara was 43 now, her wheat gold hair threaded with silver. Xander was 47, his dark hair and beard gone gray, his body still strong but marked by the years of hard living. They'd been married nearly 20 years. They were at the mountain cabin when the visitor arrived, a young woman riding a sorrel mare, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. She was perhaps 20, with dark hair and determined eyes, and she looked exhausted. "Sorry to intrude," she called out as Xander stepped onto the porch. "I got turned around in the high passes. Someone in town said Xander Vaughn might be able to help me find my way to the mining camps on the other side of the range." Xander studied her with the same careful attention he'd once given Zara. "You're alone?" "I am now. My guide abandoned me 2 days back when things got difficult." Her chin lifted. "But I paid for passage to those camps and I intend to get there. My brother is working there, and I have supplies he needs." Zara emerged from the cabin, wiping her hands on her apron. She saw herself in this young woman, saw the same stubborn determination, the same refusal to be defeated by circumstance. "You'd better come inside," she said. "Have something to eat and rest before you go anywhere." Over dinner, the young woman introduced herself as Margaret Flynn, headed to the camps to bring her brother medicine for an injured leg. She was fierce and independent, traveling alone through dangerous country because no one else would help her. "You remind me of someone I used to know," Zara told her, smiling at Xander across the table. "Oh?" Margaret looked between them. "Myself, 20 years ago. Running west with more courage than sense, determined to make my own way no matter the cost." "What changed?" Margaret asked. Zara reached for Xander's hand, their fingers intertwining in the familiar gesture. "I met someone who understood that strong women don't need to be tamed or broken or changed. They just need to be trusted, respected, and given room to be themselves." Xander squeezed her hand, "And I learned that earning someone's trust slow is worth more than all the rushed promises in the world." Margaret stayed with them for 3 days while Xander prepared for the journey to the mining camps. He wouldn't hear of her going alone, insisted on guiding her himself despite Zara's worry. "The passes are still dangerous this time of year," he told his wife. "I'll see her safely there and back. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Zara kissed him goodbye on the porch, same as she'd done 100 times before. "Come back to me," she said. "Always," Xander promised. She watched him ride out with Margaret, his broad back straight in the saddle, and she whispered a prayer to whatever gods watched over mountain men and the women who loved them. Xander returned 16 days later, healthy and whole, with stories of treacherous passes and grateful brothers, and Margaret's fierce determination to make the journey again on her own someday. "She'll be fine," he told Zara. "She's got the heart of a wild Mustang, that one." "Takes one to know one," Zara teased, and Xander laughed, pulling her close. That summer, on a warm evening in late July, they celebrated their 20th anniversary. Wyatt came home from his surveying work, brown from the sun and full of stories. Rose helped her mother prepare a feast, and Sarah traveled up from town with her husband and 3 children. They gathered on the cabin's wide porch, 3 generations brought together by the love of 2 people who'd been brave enough to trust when everything in their pasts told them not to. "Tell us the story again," Rose's youngest nephew begged, "about how Grandpa won Grandma's heart." Xander and Zara exchanged glances, their eyes holding 20 years of shared memories, shared challenges, shared joys. "Well," Xander began, settling the boy on his knee, "it started in a saloon in Stockton on a day when a mountain man came down from the high country and saw a woman who'd forgotten how to trust." Zara listened to her husband tell their story, embellishing some parts, softening others, always making her sound braver and himself less heroic than the truth. She thought about the frightened woman she'd been, the one who'd run west in search of freedom but found only different chains. She thought about the lonely man who'd lived in the mountains, convinced that isolation was the price of peace. And she thought about how love, real love, didn't trap or tame or break. It freed, it healed, it transformed. "The end," Xander concluded, kissing the top of the boy's head. "And they lived happily ever after." "Did they really?" the boy asked, in that skeptical way of children who were starting to understand that life is more complicated than stories. Zara reached for Xander's hand, and he took it without looking, the gesture as natural as breathing. "They really did," she said. "Not perfectly, not without challenges, but happily, yes, very happily indeed." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and deep purple, Zara Montgomery Vaughn leaned against her husband's solid warmth and felt grateful for every moment that had led her here. For the courage it took to flee Philadelphia, for the strength it took to build a life in Stockton, for the faith it took to trust a mountain man who'd promised to earn her love slow. She'd spent so many years being compared to a wild Mustang, and maybe there was truth in that. But what people forgot about Mustangs was that they weren't meant to be alone. They thrived in herds, in families, in the company of others who understood their need for open spaces and freedom. Xander had understood that from the beginning. He'd never tried to corral her or break her spirit. He'd simply offered partnership, patience, and love, giving her room to run but always being there when she chose to return. And she always returned, to his arms, to their home, to the life they'd built together in the space between the town and the mountains, between civilization and wilderness, between fear and trust. Years continued to pass, gentle and full. Wyatt married a surveyor's daughter he met on his travels, a practical woman named Claire, who shared his love of maps and open spaces. They gave Zara and Xander their first grandchild in 1902, a boy they named Xander after his grandfather. The old mountain man cried when he first held his namesake, tears streaming into his gray beard. Rose took over management of the saloon when she turned 21, with Sarah staying on as her partner and mentor. She proved herself just as capable as her mother, but with a softer touch that endeared her to the rough clientele. She married at 24, a quiet carpenter named James, who built her the trading post she'd dreamed of, situated halfway between Stockton and the mountain passes. As for Zara and Xander, they grew old together in the best possible way. Their bodies slowed, but their spirits remained young. They still spent summers in the mountains, though they hired younger men to help with the heavy work. They still held hands like newlyweds, still stole kisses when they thought no one was watching, still talked late into the night about everything and nothing. On their 30th anniversary, Xander gave Zara a gift. It was a painting commissioned from an artist in San Francisco, showing a wild Mustang running free across an open plain. But if you looked closely, you could see in the background a massive stallion keeping pace, not chasing, but simply running alongside, keeping watch. "That's us," Xander said softly. "You, wild and free as you were always meant to be. Me, earning the privilege of running beside you every day of my life." Zara kissed him, tasting salt from the tears on both their faces. "Best decision I ever made," she whispered against his lips, "was trusting you." "Best decision I ever made," Xander replied, "was having the patience to wait for you." They lived to see their grandchildren grow, to hold great-grandchildren, to celebrate 50 years of marriage on a summer evening at the mountain cabin, surrounded by the family they'd created and the love they'd nurtured. The Wild West they'd known was fading, giving way to automobiles and electricity and all the trappings of the new century. But in the high country, in the space between sky and stone, the old ways persisted. And when Xander Vaughn finally closed his winter sky eyes for the last time at the age of 73, with his wife of 51 years holding his hand, his last words were simple. "Thank you for trusting me." Zara lived another 5 years without him, and though she missed him with an ache that never fully faded, she didn't regret a single moment. She'd lived a life beyond anything she could have imagined that day she fled Philadelphia in a black dress with a carpet bag. She'd known freedom, known love, known the joy of building something lasting with someone who saw her truly. On a clear autumn morning in 1929, Zara Montgomery Vaughn was laid to rest beside her husband in the small cemetery overlooking the valley they'd both loved. Her daughter and son stood by the grave, their own children and grandchildren gathered around, 4 generations born from the love of a wild woman and a patient mountain man. "She's got the heart of a wild Mustang," Rose told her grandchildren that evening, gathered around the fire in the old saloon. "That's what people used to say about Grandma Zara, but Grandpa Xander, he understood something others didn't. He knew that wild things don't need to be tamed. They just need to be trusted, respected, and given room to be themselves." "Tell us the story," the children begged, as children always do. So Rose told them the story of the bullet through the saloon window, the mountain man with winter sky eyes, the slow earning of trust that grew into the deepest love. She told them about patience and partnership, about courage and compromise, about 2 people who'd been alone in different ways, finding completeness in each other. She told them that happily ever after wasn't a fairy tale. It was a choice, made every day, to love and trust and build something beautiful together. It was work and laughter, tears and triumph, ordinary moments that added up to an extraordinary life. And as the fire burned low and the children drifted toward sleep, Rose looked around at the family her parents had created, the legacy of love they'd left behind, and she knew that some stories never really end. They just continue, generation after generation, in the hearts and lives of those who come after. Somewhere in the mountains, a wild Mustang ran free beneath an endless sky, and beside her ran a faithful stallion who'd earned her trust slow, one patient day at a time. And they ran together, wild and free and forever bound into the golden light of a western sunset that never truly fades.